I'm Jessica Ward. I'm 30 years old, and I've learned that sometimes the sharpest wounds don't come from knives. They come from family, from words spoken casually, as if your heart isn't sitting right there in the room with them. Growing up in the Ward household meant two things: perform and pretend. We weren't wealthy, but appearances mattered more than honesty. My mother, Linda, believed status was currency, and her pride, her identity, lived through my two older brothers, Eric and Nathan. They were her trophies, her proof she'd done something right. And me? I wasn't a trophy. I was a reminder that she couldn't control everything. From the outside, we looked like a picture-perfect American family. Sunday dinners, holiday photos, matching pajamas on Christmas morning. But inside those walls, I lived in the silence between her approval and her disappointment, a silence that was louder than shouting. I wasn't rebellious. I wasn't dramatic. I was just invisible. By the time I reached my 20 seconds, I stopped trying to win her approval, not because I didn't want it, but because I was tired of trying to breathe underwater. Still, when the invitation to her 60th birthday gala arrived, embossed in gold with her signature dramatic flair, something in me paused. The event was black tie only, held at an upscale vineyard just outside Chicago. A slideshow, speeches, catered dinner, the works. Typical Linda. I spent days debating going. Why walk back into fire when you'd finally learned to stop burning? But part of me needed to go, not to prove something to her, but to make peace with the version of me that had spent decades trying to be enough. The evening of the party, I stood in my apartment, surrounded by options: gowns in deep maroon, navy, silk, emerald velvet. I chose a simple black dress, elegant, minimal, quiet. The kind of dress worn by someone who doesn't need permission to exist. On my dresser sat the small velvet box, deep burgundy, soft, silent. I had picked it up 2 weeks earlier, after signing papers that changed everything. At first, I wasn't sure I would give it to her. Then I realized the gift wasn't for her. It was for me, the final full stop at the end of a sentence I should have stopped writing years ago. As I drove to the vineyard, tension and memory mixed like smoke and oxygen. Every mile pulled me closer to the woman who raised me, and the little girl who still sometimes wished she had been raised differently. The venue was stunning. Long oak tables, crystal chandeliers, white roses arranged in towering vases. People were already laughing, clinking glasses, exchanging rehearsed compliments. My brothers spotted me before my mother did. Eric smirked. "Jess, wow, you actually showed." Nathan added, "Miracles do happen." Old reflex. Smile, laugh lightly, pretend it doesn't sting. But tonight, I didn't play along. "Good evening," I said simply. Polite, controlled. Their smiles faltered. They weren't used to boundaries. My mother made her entrance moments later, wrapped in champagne, satin, and dripping diamonds, loud enough to be noticed, subtle enough to be admired. The room applauded. She soaked it in. When she finally reached me, her eyes scanned me the way someone inspects a dress they almost like something close to approval, but not quite. "You look simple," she said. "Not beautiful. Not lovely. Just simple." It was her way of reminding me I had missed the mark. I nodded. "Happy birthday, Mom." She kissed the air beside my cheek, already distracted by the next greeting. As dinner was served, the conversations around the table swirled with promotions, mortgages, babies, investments, the acceptable milestones. I spoke little. I listened more. I watched her, radiant, adored, oblivious. Then came the moment, the part she lived for, the speech. She stepped onto the small stage, holding a microphone like it belonged to her. "Thank you all for being here," she began. 60 years, and I've built a life I'm proud of." She gestured toward my brothers. "My sons, my boys, you've given me a reason to stand tall. Successful careers, families, stability. You've made me proud." Applause. Loud, enthusiastic. Then she looked at me. And my daughter. Silence hovered. "She's just disappointing." Laughter rippled through the room. Unsure at first, then rolling, normalized by her confidence. My heart didn't break, it hardened. Slowly, calmly, I stood. Every head turned. I walked toward her, not fast, not trembling. Controlled, certain. When I reached the stage, I held out the velvet box with both hands. "From one disappointment to another," I said softly. Her smile vanished. Confusion replaced cruelty. And as I placed the box into her hand, the room froze. She opened it. And when she read what was inside, she didn't gasp. She collapsed, screaming. And just like that, the silence she had used to diminish me became the silence that exposed her. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. I simply turned and walked away. The moment my mother collapsed, the room erupted, not in chaos, but in a stunned, uneasy panic. Guests shot to their feet, chairs screeching across polished floors. Someone shouted her name. My brothers rushed forward, their faces flushed with confusion and anger. A waiter dropped a tray of champagne flutes, glass shattering across tile like punctuation. I kept walking. Not fast, not dramatic, just steady. I heard my name, sharp and commanding. "Jessica, stop." It was Eric's voice, but I didn't turn. For the first time in my life, I didn't obey. I reached the lobby, inhaled deeply, and finally exhaled the breath I'd been holding since childhood. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. It was strange. How calm can feel like power when you've spent years drowning in silence. Outside, the night air was cold enough to sting. I wasn't sure whether to get in my car or simply stand there until the world caught up to what just happened. And it didn't take long. The double doors burst open behind me. Eric was first, jaw clenched, footsteps heavy. Nathan followed, looking less angry and more rattled. "What the hell was that?" Eric demanded. I didn't answer. People who ask questions out of outrage rarely want the truth. Nathan tried next. "Jess, what was in that box?" She freaked out. "She's crying, like really crying." I finally met his eyes. "You'll find out." Eric stepped closer. "No, you're going to tell us right now." Typical. Not a single word about her speech, about what she said to me, about the humiliation I had endured for 30 years. Only outrage that she was finally held accountable. I clenched my jaw but kept my voice level. She humiliated me publicly. I responded publicly. That's the beginning and end of it. Eric scoffed. "Oh, come on, you're being dramatic." There it was, the family script. I was always too emotional, too sensitive, too much. But tonight, I wasn't shrinking. "For years," I said quietly. "She's treated me like a mistake no one wanted to admit existed." Tonight she just said it out loud. Nathan's expression cracked. Not fully, but enough to show something. Maybe discomfort, maybe guilt. "You didn't have to do it like that," he murmured. "Didn't I?" I asked, because when she said what she said, not one of you stood up. No one stopped her. No one even looked shocked. Silence stretched between us. Eric tried again, but his voice dropped, losing some of its heat. "What's in the box, Jess?" For a moment, I considered telling them. But then I remembered every birthday card signed without love. Every family photo where I stood at the edge. Every dinner toast where my name was the afterthought, if acknowledged at all. And I realized the answer didn't belong to them. Not yet. "You'll know soon," I said. "Everyone will." Their eyes widened. Not dramatic, just enough to show nerves. Eric crossed his arms. "So that's it? You ruin her night and walk away?" A humorless smile tugged at my mouth. "She ruined years of my life." I responded for 2 minutes. Before either could reply, my phone buzzed in my clutch. Unknown number. I normally ignore those, but something, instinct maybe, made me answer. "Jessica Ward?" a voice asked. Female, calm, professional. "Yes. This is Detective Harper with the Evanston Police Department. Are you still on the property?" My stomach tightened. Not fear, just awareness. "I'm outside the main entrance." "We need you to stay there. Officers are on their way." Nathan blinked. "Police? Why?" I ended the call without answering him. Within minutes, 2 officers pulled up. People from the event spilled onto the patio, whispering, pointing, speculating. Cameras were out, phones raised. but no one stepped closer. One officer approached me. "Miss Ward, we need to ask you about the contents of the box you gave your mother." Before I could speak, the vineyard doors opened again. My mother appeared, supported by 2 staff members, mascara smeared, breathing uneven. In her hand was the velvet box, still open. Inside it, visible even from where I stood, was the flash drive. She looked at me, not with anger, with fear. "You had no right," she whispered, voice thin and breaking. "None." Eric and Nathan turned to me, full confusion replacing indignation. "What's on that drive, Jess?" Nathan asked. "This time," I answered. "Audio," I said steadily. "A recording." Eric frowned. "A recording of what?" I held his gaze. "Of Mom talking to her lawyer the day she tried to remove Dad from the will while he was in chemo." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My mother's hand shook violently. "You were never supposed to hear that," she said, voice cracking. I nodded. "I know." She closed her eyes, like the truth itself was blinding. And then, quietly, trembling, "How? How did you get it?" There were many things I could have said, but the truth was simple. Dad sent it to me before he died. Her breath caught, sharp, broken, like a bone snapping inside her. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, she wasn't untouchable. She wasn't powerful. She was human. And terrified. The officer spoke again. "Miss Ward, did you threaten your mother with this recording?" I shook my head. "No, I didn't threaten anyone. I just stopped keeping her secrets." And as the murmurs grew, as the room behind us fractured under the weight of truth, I realized something. This wasn't revenge. It was release. The police didn't arrest anyone. There were no handcuffs, no dramatic declarations, no flashing lights shutting down the event. Real life isn't a movie. Consequences unfold slower, quieter, like cracks forming beneath tile long before the floor collapses. After answering a few more questions, the officers left, and the crowd slowly drifted back inside, though the celebration never resumed. The music wasn't turned back on. The speeches stopped. The night died the moment the truth surfaced. My mother stayed seated near the entrance, shoulders curled inward. Her jewelry, diamonds she'd worn like armor, suddenly looked heavy against her skin. She avoided eye contact with everyone, especially me. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Eric and Nathan hovered beside her, whispering urgently, casting glances in my direction like I detonated a bomb instead of exposing one already ticking. Finally, my mother lifted her head. "Jessica," she said softly, "we need to talk, not here." I said nothing. I didn't need to. Silence finally belonged to me. She stood, shaky but composed enough to maintain dignity, and walked toward a smaller room off the main hall, a private tasting room lined with wine barrels and soft lighting. I followed, not because she asked, but because I needed closure more than pride. Inside, the door clicked shut behind us. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she turned toward me, eyes red, voice raw. "Why would you do that?" she whispered. I let out a slow breath. "Mom, you tried to remove Dad from the will while he was fighting for his life. He deserved better." Her jaw tightened, and her response came fast, rehearsed, defensive. He was delusional. The treatment made him confused. He wasn't thinking clearly. "No," I said quietly. "He knew exactly what he was doing. That's why he recorded the call." She froze, just a flicker, enough to confirm she knew he had been lucid. I stepped closer. "Do you want to know when he sent it to me?" She didn't answer. "The night before he died." Her eyes flickered with something, regret, or maybe the realization that she could no longer rewrite the past. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. You weren't supposed to know about that. It was a mistake. I was angry. Your father and I had disagreements." "That wasn't a disagreement," I said. "It was betrayal." She flinched. Silence stretched again, heavier this time. "When did you listen to it?" she asked. 2 months after the funeral," I replied. "I couldn't at first. I wasn't ready." "And what made you ready?" I swallowed. "The speech at Thanksgiving." Her face flickered with confusion, then recognition. She remembered. At Thanksgiving last year, surrounded by relatives, she toasted my brother's careers and accomplishments and joked that I was still figuring life out. I had been working as a project manager for a medical robotics firm, earning more than either of my brothers at the time. But none of that mattered. Not then, not ever. That moment had carved something into me, something cold and final. "You've always compared us," I said. "Always made sure I knew I wasn't what you wanted." She shook her head, tears finally spilling. "No, Jessica, no. I wasn't comparing you. You just what?" I asked quietly. "Wanted a daughter who fit your mold? Wanted someone who validated your choices? Someone easier to show off?" She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again, because she knew I wasn't wrong. Her next words were barely a whisper. "I didn't know how to love you." The sentence cracked something open. Not pain. Truth. Real, unfiltered, unglamorous truth. I nodded slowly. "I know," I said. And for a long time I thought that meant something was wrong with me. She stared at me, really stared, like she was seeing me as a whole person for the first time instead of a flaw she didn't know how to smooth out. "So the box, the recording," she murmured, "was this revenge?" "No." My voice was firm, steady. "It was the first time I chose myself." She looked down, hands twisting in her lap. "What happens now?" she asked. I shrugged gently. "That's up to you." Her breath trembled. "And if I want to fix this?" I met her eyes. "Then you start by acknowledging what happened. Not defending it, not excusing it, just owning it." She nodded slowly, as if the weight of that single sentence might break her spine. Outside the door, I could hear muffled voices, guests leaving, staff cleaning, the final unraveling of the night she believed would celebrate her legacy. I took one final breath. "Mom," I said softly, "you don't get to choose the version of the story where you didn't do the damage." She closed her eyes, grief etched into every line of her face. "And you don't get to pretend I didn't survive it." I turned toward the door. This time, she didn't call after me. She just whispered, barely audible, "I never thought I'd lose you." I paused, but didn't turn. "You never had me," I said. "You had expectations." And with that, I walked out. The days after, the party didn't explode into chaos. They dissolved, slowly, quietly, into consequences no one could avoid anymore. The first sign everything had changed came the next morning, when I woke to 27 missed calls and 14 voicemails. Most were from numbers I recognized. A few weren't. I didn't listen to a single message. Instead, I made coffee, wrapped myself in a blanket, and sat on my balcony while the city moved around me. Cars humming, dogs barking, distant sirens weaving through traffic. Life didn't pause because something inside me had shifted, but somehow the world looked clearer, quieter, more honest. Around noon, the texts started coming, not from family, but from people who'd been at the party. Some were simple. "I'm sorry." Others were bold. "She crossed a line. You just finally drew one." And then there were the ones I expected. "You embarrassed her. You should apologize. Family is family. You don't throw them under the bus." I didn't respond. By late afternoon, my phone buzzed again, this time with a name I hadn't seen in years. Aunt Ruth. My mother's older sister, the relative who had slowly drifted out of the family orbit after a falling out no one fully discussed. Her message was short. "Call me when you're ready. I understand more than you know." I stared at the text longer than I meant to. Because for the first time, someone wasn't asking for my guilt or compliance. They were offering understanding. 2 days passed before the first in-person confrontation. I had just finished a meeting at work when the receptionist messaged me. "Your brother is here. Says it's urgent." I considered ignoring it, but avoidance wasn't progress, only postponement. So I walked downstairs. Eric stood in the lobby wearing a suit, shoulders stiff, jaw locked in that familiar expression, anger pretending to be control. The moment he saw me, he exhaled sharply, like he'd been holding the breath since the vineyard. "We need to talk," he said. I nodded. Outside. We stepped into the crisp afternoon air. Cars passed. A woman jogged by with a stroller. A delivery driver whistled as he unloaded boxes. Normal life continued. He shoved his hands in his pockets. Mom hasn't left the house since the party. I said nothing. She isn't sleeping. She's barely talking. She's different. Still, I waited. Because he wasn't here to update me. He was here to blame me. Finally, he said it. You could have handled it privately. I tilted my head slightly. Like she handled her speech privately? His eyes flickered. Annoyed. Caught. That was a joke, a bad one. No, I said softly. It was a belief she finally said out loud. He didn't respond. So I continued. Eric, you've always been safe. The golden sun. The proof she got something right. Of course you think discomfort is betrayal. She's never turned it on you. He bristled. You think this is easy for me, watching our family fall apart? It wasn't a family, I said. It was a hierarchy. Silence settled between us. Not angry, just honest. After a moment, he sighed. What do you want from her? For the first time in years, I didn't hesitate. Accountability, not excuses, not silence, not pretending, just the truth. His expression changed, not softened, but thoughtful. And if she never gives that? He asked quietly. I let out a slow breath. Then I'll still be okay. That seemed to unsettle him more than anything I'd done. Finally, he nodded. Slow, reluctant acceptance. I'll tell her, he said. But don't expect miracles. I don't, I replied. I stopped expecting anything a long time ago. He turned to leave, then paused. You know, Dad talked about you more than you think. Maybe that's why she reacted the way she did. I blinked. What do you mean? He shrugged. After his diagnosis, you were the one he asked for, not us. Then he walked away, leaving me with a sentence that felt like an unopened door. That evening, I called Aunt Ruth. She answered on the first ring. I've been waiting, she said, not accusing, just matter of fact. Why? I asked. Because women like your mother don't know how to love daughters who won't fit inside the box they built their own identity around. I closed my eyes. She continued. And daughters like you? We spend years thinking we're broken, when really, we're just different from what they wanted. I didn't speak because my throat tightened. She exhaled gently. I left the family for the same reason you finally stood up. The only difference is, you did it publicly. And was it the right choice? I whispered. Yes, she said. Not because it punished her, but because it finally protected you. A silence followed. Not heavy, but full. The kind that comes when truth finally finds its place. Then she added softly. Jessica, pain handed down becomes pain repeated, unless someone is brave enough to stop it. I let the words settle. Because deep down, I already knew. I hadn't ended a relationship. I had ended a cycle. And for the first time in my life, that felt like love. Love for myself. A week passed before my mother reached out. Not a call, not a voicemail, just a text. We need to talk. Dinner, neutral ground. Neutral ground. The phrasing alone told me everything. She wasn't ready to apologize, but she was afraid of losing control of the narrative. Still, I agreed. Not for her. For closure, we met at an upscale Italian restaurant downtown, the kind with dim lighting, quiet music, and prices designed to discourage honesty. She arrived 5 minutes late, dressed impeccably, makeup flawless, posture perfect, like she'd ironed her emotions before walking in. But when she saw me, something flickered in her expression. Not softness, more like uncertainty. We sat. The waiter approached. She ordered wine immediately. I asked for water. When he left, silence settled between us. Thick, rigid. Finally, she spoke. You blindsided me. Her voice wasn't sharp, just tired. Or maybe rehearsed. I nodded. And you blindsided me in a room full of people who were supposed to be family. She shifted, discomfort slipping through her controlled exterior. That comment, I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I leaned back slightly. Then how did you mean it? She opened her mouth, then closed it. The truth had nowhere to go. After a long moment, she said, You've always been different, harder to understand. You never wanted the things most people do. I didn't interrupt. You never needed me, she continued, not like the boys did. I let out a short exhale, not a laugh, but close. I needed you, I said quietly. I just stopped asking. She looked up, surprised. You think I wanted to spend my childhood competing for scraps of affection? No. I wanted a mother who saw me, not just the mold I didn't fit. Her eyes glistened, but didn't fall. Not yet. The waiter returned with wine. She took a long sip before setting the glass down with a faint tremor. What was your plan, Jessica? To expose me? To humiliate me in front of everyone? No, I replied steadily. My plan was to give you the one thing you gave me my whole life. Honesty without softness. Her breath hitched, but she didn't deny it. She just whispered, I didn't know you heard that recording. I wasn't meant to, I said. Dad knew that, that's why he sent it. At the mention of him, she froze. For the first time since he died, I saw grief. Not swallowed, not weaponized, just raw. She stared at her glass. I was scared, she said finally, not of losing him, of losing everything we built, our life, our image. Her voice cracked. He was dying, and I didn't know how to prepare for a world where I wasn't his wife. I softened, but only slightly. Fear doesn't excuse cruelty. She nodded, slowly, painfully, like her neck struggled under the weight of accountability. I know. Silence settled, different this time, not avoidance. Processing. After a moment, she said, You think I didn't love you, that I never cared. I met her eyes. I think you loved who you wanted me to be. She blinked, and finally, a tear slipped free. You're right, she whispered. I did. My throat tightened, not with anger. With grief for the version of her I never had. She continued, voice fragile. When you were little, you didn't cling, you didn't follow, you sat alone drawing or reading, and I told myself you didn't need closeness. I needed safety, I said, and I never felt it. She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. I'm sorry, she whispered, not because you exposed me, not because people know, but because I didn't know how to love the daughter I had. My chest tightened. Not relief, not forgiveness. Recognition. She wasn't asking to erase the past. She was acknowledging it. I swallowed. Mom, I don't know what our relationship will look like. Maybe we rebuild, maybe we don't. But I won't shrink myself to make you comfortable anymore. She nodded, tears falling freely now. I don't want you to, she said. I want to learn the version of you I missed. The honesty wasn't perfect. It wasn't warm or cinematic. But it was real. She took a shaky breath. One more question, she said softly. Why now? Why not sooner? I looked at her, the woman who raised me, hurt me, shaped me, and never fully knew me. Because, I said gently, he's gone, and the silence died with him. She closed her eyes, absorbing it, accepting it. Then she whispered, Thank you for not letting this end with hate. I stood, placed enough cash to cover my meal on the table, and took my purse. Before leaving, I spoke one final truth. This wasn't about hate, it was about finally choosing me. And for the first time in her life, she let me walk away without calling me back. Healing didn't happen in a dramatic moment. There was no sunrise epiphany, no cinematic hug, no sudden closing of old wounds. It came slowly, quietly, like a door left slightly open that eventually swings wider with time, curiosity, and effort. After dinner with my mother, our relationship shifted, not into comfort, but into honesty. And honesty, I learned, is the first language of repair. Weeks passed. We didn't speak every day, sometimes not even every week. But when we did talk, something was different. The conversations weren't polished or performance-driven. They were awkward, unsteady, and sometimes painfully quiet. But they were real. One evening she called and said, I bought a book on emotional resilience. I don't understand all of it yet. Another time, I saw an article about daughters raised without affirmation. It reminded me of us. Not me. Us. There was weight in that word. Meanwhile, life outside our history kept moving. My work became a grounding rhythm again. projects, deadlines, morning coffee in the same seat near the office window. I saw friends more often, laughed more easily, and started noticing something I hadn't expected. Without the constant ache for approval, I had space inside myself I'd never felt before. One afternoon, while clearing out old storage boxes in my closet, I found a stack of journals from high school. The handwriting was uneven, emotional, hopeful. Page after page described one recurring theme. Maybe tomorrow she'll see me. I closed the journal and set it aside, not to erase the past, but to honor the girl who lived through it. She deserved that. 3 months after the birthday incident, my mother asked if I would visit the house. Not for a holiday. Not for an obligation. Just a quiet afternoon. Driving there felt strange. Familiar roads holding memories that no longer stung the way they once did. The house looked the same, but I didn't arrive as the version of myself who used to walk through that door. She opened it before I could knock. No dramatic greeting. No cold politeness. Just a small, nervous smile. Inside, the house felt different, not visually, but emotionally, as if the air itself wasn't working so hard to uphold a perfect image. We sat in the living room. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then she stood, walked to a drawer, and pulled out a small envelope. Her hands trembled as she handed it to me. "I found this," she said softly. "Your father wrote it before he died. I couldn't open it. I think it was meant for you." My breath caught. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single handwritten note. "Jess, you are strong in ways this family may never fully understand. Don't spend your life waiting for applause in a room that was never built for your voice. Be louder than fear. I'm proud of you. Not someday. Not eventually. Now. Love, Dad." My vision blurred. My mother's voice shook. "He talked about you all the time. I just didn't want to believe he connected with you more than he did with the boys. It made me feel like I'd failed." I looked at her, not as the woman who hurt me, but as a human being who carried her own private wounds, shaped by her own unspoken history. "You didn't fail," I said quietly. "You just didn't know how to love without fear." Tears slid down her cheeks, uncontrolled, unguarded. "I want to learn," she whispered. "Not because I'm afraid of losing you, but because I finally realized I never really knew you." It wasn't an apology. It was something bigger. A beginning. I nodded. "We'll take it slow." She exhaled, relieved. I'd like that. Months turned into a new normal. We met for coffee sometimes. She asked questions, not the ones meant to evaluate or compare, but the ones meant to understand. My brothers kept their distance at first, unsure what to do with a dynamic that no longer placed them at the unquestioned center. Eventually, conversations resumed, cautious, but civil. Time will decide what they become. But the biggest shift wasn't in them. It was in me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living to be someone's version of worthy. I was simply living. And somewhere along the way, the anger loosened. Not erased, not forgotten. Just softened. Because forgiveness, I learned, isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about unhooking yourself from the moment that hurt you. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that velvet box, the one that shattered a carefully curated life. If I could go back, would I change that moment? No. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. That moment wasn't an ending. It was a declaration. I will not be silent in chapters where I deserve to be seen. So if there's one message I carry from all of this, it's simple. You don't owe your voice to the places that muted you. Stand. Speak. Walk away if you must. Not to destroy, but to rebuild. Your story. Your boundaries. Yourself.